All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Antiwar Radio on Chaos 95.9 FM in Austin, Texas. And our next guest on the show is Dr. Ron Paul, Republican congressman representing District 14 in South Texas. He's the author of the books The Case for Gold with Louis Lehman, Gold, Peace, and Prosperity, Mises and Austrian Economics, A Personal View, A Foreign Policy of Freedom, and Pillars of Prosperity. Welcome back to the show, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you. Good to be with you.
As everybody can tell here, The Case for Gold, that was the Minority Report of the Gold Commission, right?
Right, yeah, sure was.
All right, so obviously you have the background in economics, and more those of us who watch cable TV news can see other people in the media finally picking up on this fact and asking you about your view. And I'd like to ask you, I think, principally about what some of the things you said on CNN yesterday. I think they basically started off the interview the same way I'd like to today, with a question actually suggested by a caller earlier. Barack Obama says that the worst is over, that the economic recovery has begun. Yesterday you didn't seem to buy that. I was wondering if you could explain why not.
Well, all they're going by is a blip upward in the stock market. But, a lot of people have been losing a lot of money, not just in the last couple of years, but they've been losing a lot of money for the past 10 years. If you go back to the NASDAQ bubble collapse, a lot of people lost a lot then, and they never got back in. But then with all the new credit in the last 10 years, there were enough speculators going in and people wanting to spend money, and they bid these markets up again, all at the encouragement of the government and the Federal Reserve. But now with this bust, it's gone down again, but I think it's in bad shape. And besides, everything we've done so far has been completely wrong. We've created more spending, more debt, and more inflation, created a lot more money out of thin air. So for them to think this is over, it would mean that we as Americans would never have to work again, because the foreign governments and the foreign people just love us. They trust us, they trust our military, and they trust our economy, and therefore all we're obligated to do is create money, and then they'll sell us whatever we want. And that's just a dream. So the fact that the market's up a little bit, I think, doesn't indicate in one way, in any way, that this recovery is on its way up.
Mm-hmm. Well, but now the NASDAQ bubble popped back in 2000, and they succeeded in at least making it seem like we had a recovery all the way up through last year. So could it be that even if it's a pseudo recovery, that we're going to have it and basically things will look good at least for the next few years?
It's always possible. It might be 6 months. It might be a year or so, because even in the 30s, they got some recovery periods of time. And unemployment went down a little bit. But as long as Roosevelt and the Hoover policies continued, the real rebuilding of the economy couldn't occur. So even by 1939, there was a very, very high unemployment rate, 18 or 19%, and we're doing the same thing. So the fact that there is some correction, people feel good about what's happening, or at least they have this wishful thinking, I just don't think it's going to be real growth. We haven't done anything. We haven't, gotten rid of the bad debt. We haven't gotten rid of the malinvestment. We haven't, restored sound money. We haven't gotten the government's role defined the way it should be in a free market. So no, I don't see any way that we're going to come out of this as of now, even though you might see maybe even a year of some improvement, which I doubt.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked before in terms of foreign policy about how difficult it can be to come up with a libertarian solution caused by a gigantic empire. It's the kind of problem that, your policy or mine wouldn't have got us into, and yet here we are. So how do we have a libertarian solution to a war, for example? It's sort of the same question here, isn't it? The boom and bust cycle, I know as a subscriber to the Austrian theory of economics, you blame on the fractional central banking system that we have and so forth. Right. But now that we're in this mess, is it take the hangover analogy, right? Everybody felt really, really good last night because they were drunk, but now they got a hangover. Is there an argument to be made at all, sir, for a little bit of the hair of the dog to get you through? Maybe your headache is so bad in the morning, a little bit of beer would help to mellow you out till lunchtime?
Yeah, and I sometimes use the analogy of drug addiction. You know, the drug addict might want to get off drugs, but he doesn't like the consequences of not having the drugs. So he's always needing the drugs to feel better. If you get off, there are consequences. So the addiction is big government. We're addicted to big government spending. We're dependent on the government and all the guarantees, which doesn't do much more than give us a lot of moral hazard, makes us do the wrong thing. But I think this is a lot bigger problem than it was with the corrections we've had over the last 35 years. We have a much bigger bubble. It's worldwide. It's never been this way where one single currency could inflate like we have since 1971. So that's the reason that I'm not a bit optimistic about what's going to happen. But I think what we're doing is we're leading to a dollar crisis, and then the end will come and we'll have to change our ways. But we don't have to do that if we all of a sudden had more libertarian constitutional policymakers. You could easily, come to our senses and say, look, it's going to be a bad year. But we're not going to bail out anybody. We're not going to print any more money. We're not going to have any more deficit financing. And we're going to lower taxes. We're going to get rid of the income tax, and we're going to have a backing to our currency. And they say, oh, yeah, that sounds fine, but how are you going to cut the spending? And that would be the biggest challenge because nobody wants their programs cut. But I would, and I've said this many times, I would cut overseas because I think politically you could do that. But right now, the people might accept cutting overseas, but the people in charge will not. Those who love the military-industrial complex. This last week, it really bothered me to no end to see what Obama did with the Senate when they were dealing with the supplemental. Obama goes and makes these rash promises overseas of giving the IMF $100 billion. Where is he going to get $100 billion? And now they're working on gimmicks to put that into the budget where it doesn't show up, and they call this that we're going to trade assets. We're going to give them $100 billion, and they're going to give us scraps of paper and say, oh yeah, well we have something like a IMF bond, and it's a trading of assets, or we then have a line of credit. It's actually crazy. People, it's unbelievable that they're doing that. So in the midst of all this spending and everything, now we're going to give foreign international organizations like this another $100 billion.
Mm-hmm.